Uh, tired, man.
No, I'm wiped up for today.
Yeah.
My brain is fried. So this is going to be a fun conversation.
Do you have a topic?
I don't. We've
Okay.
done so well just riffing the last
Should I
couple
have
weeks.
a
I thought I'd just
topic?
keep it going.
I'm fired up this morning, but maybe I don't know if it's a good idea to jump into. Um, I do have a conundrum though.
What would that be?
Um, I've decided to do a coffee membership. So like subscription, I guess is the better
Hmm.
term. Subscription service. So um, I found this coffee from Portland. I think it's Stumpton. I don't know. In Oregon, it's delicious. I found it in my local grocery store. And they have a few varieties there. But I'm like, man, I'm so consistent in my coffee consumption. I just should have it shown up to my door. Like, it'd be cool if they offered a subscription service. So I hit up their website, and lo and behold, they have a subscription service. So, like, every 2 weeks, I can get a new bag of coffee beans, freshly, freshly roasted, right to my
Hmm.
door. Super simple. Here's my conundrum. Um, can I go grab it? I think it's called the one that I've been brewing the past couple months is called Founder's Blend, and
Okay.
it is delicious. It's very vanilla-y, coffee, some like cocoa powder. It's just like this really smooth blend. It's just a really good bean, and I really like it. So I've been brewing it for the past couple months, and I can order that. So every 2 weeks, I can get a new freshly roasted bag of Founder's Blend beans. However, they have this other one that looks very seductive, where it's called like Founder's Pick or something like that, and it's basically it could be beans that they offer for sale through their site, or it could be beans that they're like checking out. It's like they're experimenting. It's like, do we like these? Are we going with a new
Hmm.
blend? And so it's kind of like a mystery bag, like a grab bag of like whatever they're into right now. So it kind of keeps it fresh. So it's the Seinfeld issue where Banya is talking to Jerry about going to Mendy's for for the second time they go to Mendy's. Is like, now, do we get the soup because we know the soup's really good, or do we get something else? Like on one hand, if you get the soup, it's going to be really good, but then maybe you're missing out on something great. And Jerry's like, yeah, I get it. It's a risk either way. Um, so I'm trying to debate, like, do I go with the mystery bag approach and get exposed to maybe some really cool stuff, but maybe hit on some beans that I really don't like, or do I go with the tried and true Founder's Blend that is a delicious coffee bean?
Okay. Couple qualifying or
These are
clarifying
the
questions.
heavy hitting questions we're
Yes,
covering.
yes. So let's dig into some discovery here and find the right solution for you. So you haven't signed up for the subscription
Not
yet.
yet.
You've just been buying the Founders
Yeah.
Blend one off.
Hmm.
When is the Founders pick only available through subscription?
Yes. Now, yes, with an asterisk, meaning it seems like sometimes the pick could be something that you could subscribe to if you were to pick it, but it seems that other times it may be something that they may not have available for retail sale.
So Founders pick is not necessarily a blend. It's a hey, try this
Yeah,
particular.
it could be one packaging 1 month. It could be something completely different the next month.
Can you modify your subscription to say, hey, I'm going to go with the Founders pick, but if you don't like it,
Yeah,
you can go back, you can change it.
sure. Yeah.
You know what? Go with the Founders pick, try
Hmm.
it 2 times. And if you're just finding like, yeah, it's just not your cup of coffee, it's not it doesn't fit your taste, then switch to the blend you know. It
I
can't
think that's
hurt to
smart.
give it a try.
No, it can't. In fact, I've been loving the fact that we've had this kind of coffee exchange. I've had a couple friends. So I had a friend in San Francisco send me some beans from his local roaster. I had a friend up in Seattle. In fact, a guy that we worked with at one of our clients, who's also a friend, send me some beans from his local roaster. And Jim was kind enough to send me some beans from the shore.
Hmm.
It has been so cool to explore all these different ones, and I need to come up. I'm sad that I haven't like created a little database to document all these because there was one, and I think the you sent me two, and the one I think I liked the most was called Pirates Blend.
The pirate, oh, yeah, you like the Pirates blend.
It was very tasty.
Yeah, our favorite blend from them, it's called the Ocean City Coffee Company.
Yeah.
It's the Shuby blend.
Okay.
So
I didn't try that one.
yeah, I don't know if we sent you that
No,
one.
you
That
sent me the Pirates blend and one called
I think
like
maybe the Boardwalk
Sea
blend.
Boardwalk
Yeah.
blend. Yeah.
Okay. So one, they actually do roast it on the boardwalk. So they've got multiple locations. They've got three on the island, two on the boardwalk, one on like kind of like the main drag in town, and then they actually have a location not too far from here, like
Mm,
in Media, Pennsylvania. But like their main location is the one on the boardwalk, and they actually roast it on the boardwalk.
that is
That's
so
their
awesome.
tagline, and it's
Yeah.
actually true because there was one time it was just like this is maybe going back 5 6 years. I just kind of needed to get out of the house, and I drove down the walk on the boardwalk one night, and it's the middle of winter, so there's nobody there, and you can see them in there roasting. You just see the steam coming off the building
Yeah.
because they're roasting in the
So
middle of the
cool.
night on the boardwalk, and it's really really cool.
That's awesome.
So one of our favorite blends is called the Shuby blend, and people who are not from this area are not going to get the term. So a little bit of local history here. So um, it's Shuby is it's a not so nice term. People have started to embrace it in more modern times, but going back to the 30s, 40s, 50s, it was a term that the South Jersey locals referred to the tourists as
Ah,
because they would come down on a Saturday or Sunday for the day just to spend time on the beach,
yeah.
and they would bring their lunch in a shoebox. So they called them shoebies.
Shoebies. Okay.
So if you get referred to as a shoebie down there, they're making fun of you as a tourist.
That is awesome. Now I'm wondering if like every kind of touristy area has their own unique term for tourists because I think there's an episode of Family Guy where all the
Leafers.
leafers, right? No
Here
leafers.
come the leafers
All the people from New York, from Manhattan, coming. No, I guess going up, right?
going up to Rhode Island.
Going up to Rhode Island and to look at the fall leaves. The leafers.
Yeah.
It makes me laugh.
Yeah. No, I bet you there is. You go to any kind of like resort town or touristy place. Yeah, they've got their terms for the non locals coming in.
Yeah, so funny, so funny. So as I should mention, as kind as Jim is to send me amazing coffee, he's also devious in other ways. I think you sent me like 5 pounds of taffy that was consumed in like
It
three
was a one
days.
pound.
It
It was
seemed
one
like a
pound.
tremendous amount of
Yeah.
taffy. It was so delicious and gone so quick. Similar from
Yeah.
the board from the shore, right?
Yeah. There's another place on the boardwalk called Shrivers.
Oh, it was so good. Oh, so
Yeah.
delicious.
And that's what I love about small towns. And what I think a lot of people actually, what COVID has actually helped people embrace
Mm.
is with the whole idea of remote working. So this actually gives us a good segue. What I love about small towns, I've got this romantic view of small towns. I eventually we're in the Philadelphia suburbs, and at some point I'd like to move to like one of those old tiny towns somewhere.
You
Pro
wanted
the
like
grant,
5 acres and some like town
yeah,
with a quaint main street.
bingo. Like I would love to because in and you see this in South Jersey a lot with a lot of these small shore towns. While there's big corporate franchises in some, that you can find there, most of the places are mom and pop shops.
Hmm.
So a couple of places, we were just talking about where I've sent you, some of the stuff. Like these are places that have two, three, maybe four locations max. Everything is local. They're family owned, um, and like when you go down out of season, like there's nobody there. It's nice and quiet. And I'm starting to ramble right now, but you're outside of just like the cookie cutter franchises.
Yeah.
You can find those neat little places, the hole in the wall kind of places. And I know that you can find them in cities as well, but like these small towns definitely have a lot more of them. And one of the things I know I've mentioned it a couple times here, and it might be something worth digging into. One of the things I've noticed since I'm an hour and 15 minutes away from, like these kind of resort areas, it's a quick drive for us. where we're located. And it's kind of one of our things when we just need to blow off steam, when we just
Mm-hmm.
need to get out and get some scenery. It's nothing for us to jump in the car. And even with the baby at this point, we've kind of gotten into a routine where we can jump in the car and we can be away from the city and the suburbs and into these quaint little towns very, very quickly.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and one of the things I have noticed though, like being in such close proximity, they're having right now a boom of an off season.
Mm, I bet.
Like normally, so for most of these towns, the season runs from the end of May, at least the high season, end of May to beginning of September. But then you have people that have young kids on either side of that. You'll have people who will come down for come down for like a bit of the extended season, but they're saying like they're having a boom of an extended season right now because people are working remotely, kids are going to
Yeah.
school remotely, so they're getting off-season rentals and
Mm,
going down for a week or two.
that is awesome. How much of this is influence from your brother-in-law?
I'm not
Because
gonna
this,
lie,
it's you know.
that there is a bit of an influence there, um, because like whenever one of his movies are on, we'll put it on. So of course,
I'm
yeah.
like, you're describing a Hallmark movie.
Oh yeah, no. Well, it's funny. A cousin of mine, she got a job in like central Pennsylvania, and she jokingly calls the town Hallmark, Pennsylvania. She's like, it is your total stereotypical, town that a Hallmark movie is set in.
Yeah. So for those listening that don't know, Jim has a brother-in-law that is he's been in a lot of Hallmark movies, right?
Yeah, at this rate, he's doing like two a year.
Yeah. So yeah, very cool. He was out in Utah in the height of summer filming a Christmas movie, right?
Yeah, like they're basically you guys were having a heat wave
Yeah.
toward the end of the summer there.
I think when he was out
and
here, it was in the hundreds. It
Yeah.
was hot.
And so, of course, imagine trying to film a winter scene where you're in winter clothes, but it's like 100 some degrees.
Yeah, brutal.
The funniest one, though, is, or at least the funniest premise was one that he shot like 4 years ago, where it was about, this movie star coming in. And he's the mayor of this small town. So you have this movie star coming in to film a movie and taking over, the whole idea of them taking over the small town at Christmas. And they did the exact same thing. They basically took over the small little town in Georgia 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. And we're shooting this movie about a movie crew coming in, taking over a small town like weeks before Christmas.
That's awesome. That's awesome. A little bit of Inception going on there.
Oh, it was like, I'm like, the irony is not missed on,
Yeah.
lost on me. But I
Very
mean,
cool.
in your area, have you seen any of that? Like people taking advantage of the remote conditions for both workers and students, and being able to go to places that they normally can't. I know we talked to Evan a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
and right now he's taking the Airstream out every
And
couple weeks.
And his new stove he bought to go with it, the solo stove, to do his little campfires, and yeah, he's
Mhm.
living it, man. Yeah, I don't live in a very touristy area, so I don't have any firsthand kind of visual on it. But if I look at my social feeds, it appears that, and it would be interesting to see the park data if they were to ever share that. It seems like interest in and spending time in the national parks in southern Utah has just exploded. And again, I don't know if it's higher than normal and people are just sharing it more, but it seems like lots of people are going out into the parks. Lots of people are getting into backpacking, even like day trips, short trips. So it feels like a lot more activity in the outdoors is happening.
Mhm.
Around here for sure. And again, I'm kind of getting that off of my social feed and seeing what people are doing. But it seems like more people are taking advantage of the opportunity to just get out in nature a bit more.
Yeah. And one of the things I've been wondering about is, with remote school. So with my wife, who's a school teacher, the remote schooling has been synchronous. So
Hmm.
kids log on at
Got it.
8:30 in the morning, and then they go from teacher to teacher, and then they wrap up at 3:10 in the afternoon or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I was originally they were going to go back hybrid, but then when they moved to remote, I was kind of saying, well, if they were really smart, they would do some kind of asynchronous learning
Yeah.
where like you plan a week ahead of time of what the assignments are, and then you have like meetups and small group chats with students, and students are able to do their work asynchronously. You do your work asynchronously, and then most of the time, then during the day, is for able to have one-on-ones or small group meetings with students to really get into those that need the help instead of just talking to a Zoom room of
Yeah.
people. I'm curious though about like other school districts who did maybe some level of asynchronous learning.
So that's definitely what we're doing. In fact, I don't know if you can hear it in the background. I can. My 5-year-old is doing his coursework right now. So
Mm-hmm.
he's in kindergarten. Some of his classmates. So we have, and I can't imagine the extra burden on the teachers. It's probably a lot. I'm sure. But we had an option. And a lot of his classmates are just back in school. However, it was shut down for 2 or 3 weeks because the teacher's aide unfortunately came down with COVID, so they shut
Mm-hmm.
down the class. But he's been remote since the beginning of school year, and it's she records the content ahead of time, and when he's ready, he can log in and consume it. I've tried to force him to be on a bit of a schedule, and it's kind of morning times for him, and when he does it, but it's not like you have to start at 9 because that's when the class starts. It's all available for him on demand. The teacher every other week has an office hour where you can go in or you can schedule time with her and go in and just kind of talk about progress. But she's also been really great about just placing random phone calls saying, hey, just checking in, how's he doing? Here's what I'm seeing. And, I know there's been lots of pushback. I know it's not perfect. It's hard on teachers. It's hard on students. But he's really been thriving in this scenario. And for us, where I'm not tethered to an office, we can do anything. That gives us just that ultimate flexibility if we wanted to. It's like, hey, let's pick up and drive down to Southern California for a few days, and there's nothing stopping it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he can do school on the road. He can do and he's already kind of programmed to do that. So for us, having that has been extremely valuable. Again, I know it's probably asking a lot of the teacher to kind of go in and pre-record and do that, but it's been awesome to have that available on demand.
Mm-hmm. No, actually, like that's exactly where I was going. So a few things there. With a lot of the remote learning, I can't help but think back to a conversation I had with Todd Shulman at the Christian
Mm,
Science Monitor. We've talked about it multiple times where a few years ago, he and his family spent 11 months, I think it was,
yeah.
on the Big Island in Hawaii. And it was like their long-term plan. And I spent some time talking to him about it. And his goal was that when the children were old enough, they have two children, he and his wife. When the children were old enough that they would understand like that they're going somewhere different than they normally would be, but not too old that it interferes with like high school like
Mm,
athletics and things like that,
right.
right? Finding that perfect age. His plan was is they were going to go live remotely for a year, and they end up going to Hawaii. That's the deal he was able to strike with the monitor. He worked remotely, and then his wife homeschooled them for that year.
Mm,
And I remember at one point he told me, he goes, I don't know if your wife wants to hear this, but like, there's a lot of wasted time during the day. I'm
yeah.
like, no, she would completely agree with you.
Yeah.
There is a ton of wasted time.
Yeah.
And that's why I think like asynchronous work, learning right now, like that's the one thing watching some of these school districts that haven't embraced it. I think it's a missed opportunity. Yes, there is prep work that's involved. You have to be almost a week ahead of time. We're recording your content the week before, so it's ready to go, whether it's recording it, preparing it, and then making sure that you have time scheduled for office hours and one-on-ones. But yeah, I
I
think just trying to duplicate what's done in the classroom remotely, you're still wasting a lot of time.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. And again, it differs from school district to school district, and I'm sure even school to school, or maybe even class to class. But it seems like such an inefficient model. And I
Mm-hmm.
watched this last year with my high school senior son at the time, where I would ask him, like, he would come home with like all of this homework. I'm like, what did you guys do in class? And it's like it seemed like every time I asked him, he's like, well, my teacher was really busy doing something else, so we just watched him. They put on a movie for us, or they just like whatever. And I'm like, what are you going to school for? And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't that the teacher wasn't working, because we would get home and he was using, and I think it's a popular platform called Canvas. He's using it in college now because they're on remote and they're using Canvas. But he would come home, log into Canvas, and his teacher would have had gone in there, and it's very similar to what my kindergarten student is doing right now. Like all of the work and lectures and assignments had been pre-recorded and built into Canvas, and then so it was almost like he went to school all day, and then he'd have to come home and go to school again at night to
Mm-hmm.
do get through all the work in Canvas. And I'm like, shouldn't all this lecture and stuff that you're doing right now, shouldn't you be doing that during class time? And it's interesting. I don't know how much. I think a lot of it's probably political, but there's this huge pushback now where it's like, oh, we're destroying our children. Like, won't someone think of the children? Like, education's so important. I'm like, why weren't you guys caring about this like last year when I'm watching my high school students waste half their day in class not doing anything? And again, it's not the teachers, it's the setup, and then come home and then have to spend 5-6 hours a night doing classwork at home just to keep up. This is broken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like totally. And it's a total missed opportunity with just not just like academic learning, but to use a cliche, experiential learning. Because that's one of the things with the conversation with Todd was, his wife would plan out the children's school week, and they would do their academic stuff, but then part of the day was them going somewhere and learning about the various, the various parts of the ecosystem out there in Hawaii. Because with in certain parts of Hawaii, you can go up to the top of a mountain in the morning and be bundled up, and it be freezing, and then drive, an hour and a half and be at the beach and go swimming, because the climate varies from location to location there. And so they would go out and learn about the local culture, the native culture, the environment, all of those different things. And I'm not going to lie. Like if my wife's school district did some level of asynchronous learning like that, we would be splitting our time between here and either the shore or some other
Yeah,
location
yeah,
where we would take advantage of my work setup, her work setup, and actually go places,
yeah.
and instead of being tethered to a computer.
Yeah, and I think I want to say as a whole we'll move in that direction. I think for people that are in an advantage situation, like I absolutely understand that I have advantages that people don't have. That
Mm-hmm.
I will be able to do that before the masses are able to do that, and I'm able to take advantage of that. I completely get that that's not the norm, but I do think in time we will start moving more towards that direction. We have to let go of the politicalization of homeschooling remote. We have to let that go and then concentrate on how can we make this not only more effective, but really more focused on what it should be, on education and learning. And that's my concern, is that too much of the debate today isn't talking about the actual learning component of it. It's more the operational of, we need to have kids in school because that's where they educate. I'm like, you're talking about the components, the nuts and bolts of it. Let's have a conversation about, was that even working before, and figure out how to make that work. Anecdotally, and when you brought this up, it reminded me. I remember very little of high school from a course perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I probably floated way too much through. I was not a great student. Um, However, I had one class which was an advanced geology course. It was held in the summer. It was 2 months, and every Saturday morning we would get on a bus and go to a different location and learn about things like fault lines, fossil layers, identifying different types of rocks. One of the trips we went and we learned about Mohs hardness scale and learned about the different hardnesses of rocks and how they're used in applications like construction and mining and manufacturing. To this day, I vividly remember not only the experiences, but a ton of the knowledge and lessons from that class, however many years ago. More than probably any other class that I took in high
Mm-hmm.
school. Like that one, the lessons and the knowledge is are just burned into my brain. Whoa, my chair unlocked.
Uh-oh.
I was like, I'm floating backwards.
Well, let's dig into that a bit. Like I kind of going back to what you're talking about, like the politicization of like kids in school instead of helping kids find the right system for themselves. Like, why do we need to focus on having them in schools? And I think that this
Yeah.
goes along the lines of what we've talked a lot about with the way we as a group do work, and trying to show like you don't have to be in an office to get things done.
Yeah.
As a contractor, no, we don't need to be on site 3 days a week to get things done. We're able to do that remotely. And I mean, for me, I think one of the things is people don't want to consider some kind of asynchronous learning setup is that it's going to reveal like what school does.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to say it trains the current general school paradigm, and there's definitely people that are trying to break that. I had a great conversation last week with Stephen Marshall, and we're going to really be exploring schooling and getting experience in future episodes. But for the most part, like the whole point of school in many ways is to train people to be good factory workers.
You couldn't be more right. And I think that the education system in the United States is very much lagging. Right? It's built to staff an industry that is long gone. And we can try to recreate manufacturing all we want in this country. It's not going to happen. It's not where the future of this country is headed, and the school districts are just really lagging, like decades behind. Because you're right. I mean, it is training them to be factory workers, and not only that. If we say, well, it's training them to be work in business offices. Yeah, it's training them under an old, archaic 1960s, 1950s style of doing business. Like those days are long gone, and I think the kids that excel post public education is not because public education worked. It's because you have these amazing teachers that say, "Screw the system. I know that that's what it's built for, but I know what's most important for my kids." And it's usually one or two, right? Maybe you get an amazing third grade teacher. Maybe you have an amazing subject teacher in eighth grade. And those few gems change the trajectory of kids' careers. And I think that is what is making it work. Just imagine if we had a system in place that made more of those gems available, what we would be creating with our schooling system. And I think a lot about, and I don't know if it was within the setup or guidelines of the school district, but I remember a couple of years ago, your wife putting a campaign together to raise money to get a 3D printer, and giving that experience to her kids. It seems to be like something. So for background, my mom was an elementary school teacher for 30 something years. And I watched her spend so much of her own personal money to get things for her classroom, to give her kids the experiences she felt they needed. And it was just completely outside the bounds of what like her playbook was for what she should have been doing. I have to believe that her students to this day probably thank her for doing that. And I think your wife is probably very similar, seeing some of the things that she's doing. She's like, yeah, I'm gonna go with the flow, but I know what these kids really need, and I'm gonna push to make it happen. Those teachers are like the real gem, and I think are the ones that are responsible for making these kids come out of the public school system in a place to really do something amazing.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny. You made me think of an experience from high school. So senior year, I'm taking a science elective, and taking an intro to physics course. And the teacher, like up until then, every teacher from grade school through to high school, you had like any kind of mathematics or science course, it was about rote memorization of formulas and theories and all of that stuff, just pure memorization of it. Every test, we would walk in and the formulas would be on the board. You'd write them out in big letters. Here are the formulas that are applicable to the course. And of course, it's a shock to all of our systems the first time he does that. And he goes, I don't care if you can memorize the formula. He goes, how many of you are going to be physicists when you grow up? Maybe one, maybe two. But if I can help you learn the concepts behind this, that will
Yeah.
help you in any career you can go into. How to think using the scientific method, how just physics concepts work. It doesn't matter if you remember the actual formula for deducing it, you'll get it. And he was a phenomenal teacher, Mr. Williams. And there was one time in class where he asked a question and calls on me, and I just blank. And I'll never forget the question. The question is you have a loaf of bread. Why does a knife cut it, and why does a hammer smash it? And I blanked. I didn't know. So he was also like the moderator in the lunchroom, when I had lunch. So he comes up to me and he's like, "Be honest with me. Did you not know, or were you not paying attention?" I said, "I didn't know. I blanked. I didn't know." He goes, "Okay, then tell me that next time, and I will explain it to you so that you walk away." And to this day, I remember why a knife cuts bread while a hammer smashes it.
That is awesome. Yeah, I mean, you need those teachers that take it to heart and aren't there to just play the system, and unfortunately, too many are that are like, speaking of metrics and kind of getting back to our world, too many are measuring to their North Star metric of like test scores and what's our average test score, and let's just game the system, and it's about getting the kids to hit this metric. You need these teachers to say, look, it's more complicated than that. It's about it's about actually teaching these kids how to learn. And we're being somewhat tough on public schooling, but this happens at the higher ed level.
Mhm.
I vividly remember being in graduate school, and observing so many of my classmates that were constantly had their name on the wall in the business building for their 4.0 perfect quarter. And I'm like, I am going to destroy these people in the business world. Like, they are not learning what's important in graduate school. Like, they are here gaming the system to get a metric, and I'm like, I can tell. Like, they don't know. Like, if the teacher were to call them, and say X, Y, and Z, they would say, well, the book says Z. That they would be right. But if the teacher would say, explain to me the fundamentals of why, they would they would draw a blank. They would
Mhm.
have
How do
no
you got how did
clue.
you get to that answer?
How did you get to that? I don't know. Like, I'm just following the diagram in the book. And I'm
Mhm.
like, these kids are gonna look back on this probably in 15 years and be like, why did I waste my time in graduate school just to get a piece of paper that said I was magna cum laude? Like, I would have been better off like learning during that time.
Mhm.
And I think, man, we can spiral this in so many directions. There's, the past few years there have been huge backlash around higher ed, that it's a waste of time, that it's more, the return on investment isn't there. And I don't think I've seen too many take the argument of, is it the approach that's wrong? We're talking about the price of school, we're talking about all this, we're talking about, well, you can learn stuff in the real world. Well, yeah, all of that is true, but I haven't heard very many people, if any, take the argument of, well, wait a minute, is the whole system just messed up, that we're learning to a grade rather than learning how to learn and learning the concepts and learning how to think? How can you devalue that in any situation? And that's the way I look back on it. Yeah, I mean, college isn't for everybody. Yeah, there's lots of different routes. I'm pretty confident in saying I wouldn't be where I am today without my experience in college, without going to graduate school. What I was able to learn there put me in a position to do what I'm doing today. But I also took a very different route than a lot of my classmates at the time, where I'm like, I don't give a crap about what my grades are. I did one quarter because I got put on probation because I
Mhm.
dropped to a 2.4 and I had to have a 2.5. So I cared to get it up to that level, but I really didn't care what my test scores were. I really didn't care what grades I got. I was truly there and I was paying it. I had a full-time job. It was me paying it because I wanted to be there, because I wanted to learn.
Mhm.
I wasn't there to get a piece of paper.
Yeah. And I mean, we could take that even further, talk about, you were saying people who were gaming the system in college. I mean, how many people do we run across in the business world where, they game the system because they make themselves look busy? They checked a bunch of stuff off a task list that they presented to their higher ups, but they didn't really dig into what was the value of those things.
Yeah.
Oh, I got 10 things done while John over there just got one done.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that that one item, provided significantly more value, whether it's saving the company money, making the company money versus the 10 things that, that other person did.
You hear that and you wonder why so many businesses are mediocre. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, most people, it isn't about creating value for the team or for the business. It's what do I need to do to take care of myself and maximize my take home and my paycheck, and that's how most big companies work. It amazes me that there are so many big companies that are doing amazing, innovative things when you see how just mediocre it is when they're like just measuring to these nonsense things, and it's tough. We've I think we've talked about this before where we've used the sports analogy of the game slowing down. I had this conversation with my boss, my very first job out of college. I think I was 3 or 4 years into that job, and I was feeling more comfortable just being open and transparent and kind of talking with my leadership. And I really remember one conversation. I said, I'm like, why is it that I'm constantly struggling? Why is it that I'm always like on the edge of being a mediocre, poor performer when it comes to measurements in the organization? And a lot of my colleagues that I'm questioning the value they're creating for the company are always getting bonuses and the high performers. And I remember him vividly saying to me, the problem with you is that you just make it look too easy.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to succeed in this world, in this company, you have to make it look more difficult. You have to make it look as difficult as it is. And whether it's because the work you've put in or whatnot, your calmness, your demeanor, the game's slowing down, the quarterback in the pocket like can see everything in slow motion. You can't act like that because it doesn't look like you're working hard enough. You
Mm-hmm.
have to make it look like this is as hard as it really is. And I'm like, what kind of world am I living in here? And that was really the turning point for me where I knew without a doubt, I'm like, this is not the world for me long term. It took me a decade after that to make any real fundamental changes, but I'm like, this is crazy, man.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember one of the times when I really started to realize that it was about optics in some
Yeah,
organizations.
in many
Um,
organizations.
yeah, in many, many organizations. I'm several years in my career, and I was that person that may show up again, like working. At that time, I was working for an organization where it's like you show up at 9, you show up at 8:30, right? You're in your desk working, and people are looking around, seeing like, are you actually working? And there was this one stretch where I'd be there until 7:30 at night. I'd skip dinner to get stuff done. But then one day, this is after doing that for multiple nights. I showed up at 9:15 in the morning, and my boss's boss, who I did get along with, still put me aside. I was like, "Don't show up at 9:15. Be here at 9." I'm like, "Okay, so it doesn't matter what I actually got done, how much time I actually spent. It's you're in your desk at 9.
Yeah.
Got it."
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've all experienced that, and that's been a huge driver for the anti culture of that we've created at 33.6, right? I mean, I experienced that at many companies. Surprisingly, Omniture was one of them, where it was about the optics of being in your desk between certain hours, and I'm like, if I ever start a company, we are doing the opposite of this, and that has been something I've been so passionate about building. It's like it's not about the optics of these set hours. Jim gets up in 3 in the morning working with the client in London. Should I be mad that he's not online at 8 in the next morning? Like, what are we doing here? We need to actually look at what we're creating and what we're doing, and it's just laziness. I think it's laziness. If we're in management and we're counting people that are in our desk between certain hours, at some level that just speaks to you being a really lazy manager, that you're not putting in the time to really understand what your your team is doing. A couple funny observations, and forgive me if I've shared these before, but a couple funny observations from my time at Omniture. So we were on AOL Instant Messenger. I'm sure security experts are probably cringing about that. and that's what we used to communicate internally. You got to think this was like what, 2004, 2005. When
Yeah,
there was no
yeah, I used it
Slack,
back
there was
then
no
too.
Microsoft Teams, there was no, So we were all on AOL Instant Messenger, and we had found out that the VP of the department was looking at the green dots to show if you were active or not, and the yellow dots to show if you were idle, to basically take inventory of what people were doing and how they were working. One of the engineers in the company wrote a little script that he distributed that you could install that would basically make sure that green dot was up most of the time, so it looked like you were there even if you weren't. I thought that
Nice.
was, people are always going to find a way around your stupid measurements.
Mm-hmm.
The second one was just so crazy. We were told from the VP of the department that the higher ups in the organization, that it was very important that we were in our desks at 9 and we did not leave before 6. And oh, I'm laughing because it's just so ludicrous. Someone in the on the implementation team raised their hand and said, "I just have a logistical question. I have a dentist appointment coming up. My dentist doesn't open until 9. You know, what do we do in those occasions where we have something that just we can't manage around?" I kid you not, this was said with 100% sincerity. What you need to do is ask your dentist if they can open early or if they can schedule a Saturday appointment for you to get your dental work done. Said with 100% sincerity. I'm like, again, like, what?
Where am I
What kind
working?
of world are we living in here? Are you just messing with me now, man? Like, are you being serious? Like, this is what we're
Mm-hmm.
doing? And they were dead serious. And it wasn't necessarily because it was the VP of the department's initiative. It was, I think they were getting beat up by their senior managers saying, wait a minute, why when I walk through the floor that half the team is missing at 2 in the afternoon? You need to get your team in order. Instead of saying, well, wait a minute, let's talk about how well your team is onboarding our new clients. How satisfied are our clients? Why isn't that the conversation? The conversation is, well, I walked through the floor and I didn't see the team, so they must be doing a crappy job.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
So
good
to
times.
kind of start to tie it back to where we started with some of this stuff and talking about wasted day, wasted time in the school day. It's just something that becomes ingrained as long as you're in your desk. It doesn't matter if you're wasting time or not. It would get God, I'm trying to correct using as my filler word.
And
Uh,
I'm trying to correct using right. Right.
right. Um, but you see, it's just something that becomes ingrained that we're here to spend this time at a desk instead of focusing on the experience of learning, or the experience of whatever product or service we're supposed to be providing.
Yeah. Hold on.
And I mean, I don't have a
This
solution to
baby
it.
is whining.
Everybody's got to take it. Oh,
There was much whining happening.
oh,
Sorry.
everything okay?
Yeah. This thing.
Oh, look at the little puppy.
Yeah. She was mad because she
Um,
was left alone.
and I mean, I don't have a solution for it. Everybody's got to find their own answer to it, and maybe it's one of these things that people's exposure to working remote, and
Yeah.
whether it's spending more time in a resort town during the off season when the crowds aren't there, to being able to, if their kids are learning asynchronously, they can make part of their day some kind of experience that you're taking them
Mm-hmm.
to go be a part of. Maybe the current situation, one of the good things that can come out of it is exactly that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if we're not in the environment of working shift work, we have to get out of the shift work mentality. And in so much of what we do in the knowledge space, whether that's knowledge work, whether that's knowledge from an education standpoint, most of the time is not shift oriented. Yeah, if you look at everything that we're doing, I mean, as we started this conversation, schooling is often looked at as shift oriented, and it doesn't
Hmm.
need to be. This is a challenge. Um, um, yeah, that's not gonna work. Um,
It's like, come on, I'm ready to play. Like,
I know.
wrap up your little recording
I
there.
know. Do we have to do podcasts? We have to go. Oh, I have a Simpsons donut here.
Nice.
Oh, Simpsons donut here. Um, we have to break out of that mentality, and I think one of the good things about the pandemic and everyone being remote work is that that's happening. That's being forced, right? Like,
Hmm.
and I just said right. With everybody being remote, we're not going in the office. We're not in the office 9 to 6 anymore, and so it's kind of forcing that breaking of that shift work mentality, which I think is a really really good thing. Um, I would like to see more organizations having that conversation. Yeah, all the conversations around how do we do remote and support that's great. But let's talk about breaking down barriers that were there before that didn't need to be there any longer. And that's one of the ones that I'm most passionate about. It's like this isn't shift work. Come on, now you want out? The joys of working from home.
Yes.
So there you go. I'm all discombobulated now.
So, well, we'll go ahead and wrap up for now. I mean, I've really liked the last couple of weeks coming in without a specific topic.
Yeah.
I'll definitely get back to thinking through and planning some more episodes. But I like how we've been able to just kind of pull a conversation
Hopefully
out of
the
our ass.
listeners, yeah, hopefully the listeners like it too. Again, even though we've had specific topics and guests in the past, even in those occasions, we've not overly structured it, and I'm glad we're staying true to that because it's one of the things that, and it's not a bad thing, but it's one of the things that, for me personally, whether it's podcasts or just entertainment in general, especially as we were in this big boom of reality television, is that everything was just overly scripted and fake and plasticky
And forced.
and forced, right? And I think ultimately people, and it's hard to pitch it to a network executive or someone that's building a big podcast network, but I think ultimately people are missing just that realism of life, and what are even the reality TV is anything but real, and we wanted to keep it that. We didn't want it to be forced. Didn't want to have these pre-scripted questions that we thought out. It's I think the concept that when you, John, and I talked about it was, what if someone walked past three guys in a coffee shop talking analytics? What would they hear? And that's kind of the vision I've
Hmm.
always had in my head of how we make this work. So
Yeah,
good stuff.
totally.
Yeah, I've enjoyed
So
these.
cool.
I've enjoyed these
Yeah, good
non-topic
stuff.
ones. Yeah.
Yeah, they've been good. So
Yeah.
cool. We'll go ahead and wrap up from now. And we'll catch everybody later.
So yeah.